So if you've ever met someone from Texas, the first thing they always tell you is where they're from, and I'm not any different. For 18 years prior to college, I was born and raised in a suburb of Dallas, Texas, and for 12 of those 18 years, I went to the same school. I wore the same uniform for 12 years, I ate at the same cafeteria for 12 years, I had the same groups of friends for 12 years, and for 12 years, there was something I absolutely hated, and that was roll call. I know what you may be thinking. How can something so mundane and so routine be the bane of my existence? Picture this. I'm sitting in a classroom on the first day of school waiting for class to begin. The teacher's at the front of the room, and he or she is getting ready to take attendance and goes down the list of names, name by name. Nathan Chang, here. Grace Cram, here. Connor Daly, here. And then came my name. But before my name was called, it was always the same pattern. A pause, a deep breath, an apology would be issued. I'm sorry in advance for butchering this name. By then the room had already erupted in laughter. I had already interjected saying, hi, hello, that's me, I'm here. And I had to go through this every single time on the first day of school, every single time we went on a field trip, every single time there was a substitute teacher, every single time attendance was taken, and I absolutely despised it. I don't know what you may be thinking, that's my first, middle, and last name. No, that's all my first name and that's all my last name, all 22 letters. My hand used to hurt after filling in that many bubbles on Scantrons every time I took a standardized test. And if that didn't annoy me enough, what annoyed me more was a name that came right after mine, Rex Dude, literally the shortest name in the history of names. So looking back at this entire ordeal, I'm a lot more flippant and lighthearted about this situation. But if I could use one word to describe how I felt during those days when I heard my name being pronounced, it would be embarrassed. I was embarrassed to have the name that I did. I always wondered why my parents couldn't have named me something easier. Why did my name have to be so difficult for everyone else to say? And while roll call is an example of a routine instance that made me feel this way, there were so many other examples down the line. When I was in 6th grade, I joined a brand new soccer team, the Coppell Stingers. I showed up for practice on the first day, excited and ready to go. And I went up to my coach to introduce myself. And he said, "What's your name, son?" I said, "My name is Kamesh," which is the name I go by. Kamesh? Kamesh. Kamesh? No, like the word calm, the letter A, and sh. Can I just call you K? And me being the shy 11-year-old I was back then, I said, okay. And so for the entire season, my coaches, my teammates, the parents of my teammates, everyone called me by a single letter, K. 22 letters have been reduced down to 1. Now imagine if your name was John and everyone called you J, if your name was Rachel and everyone called you R. How would that make you feel? Like you weren't important? Like you weren't worth the time and energy for people to learn how to say your name? Honestly, that's exactly how I felt. And it's because of instances like this and instances like roll call for why I felt so embarrassed to have the name that I did. Looking back, I can't ever recall a time where I felt proud to have my name, where I didn't view my name as anything but a burden to other people. And when I'm here today sharing these thoughts with you guys, I know I'm not alone in feeling this way. I've had so many other peers and so many other friends who've told me that they felt the same way I have. And unfortunately, a trend that I've noticed is that more and more people are choosing to follow the path of convenience, and usually this comes at the sake of identity. Take something as simple as going to Starbucks. When people order their caramel macchiato, suddenly everyone becomes a John or a Jim or a Rachel or a Jade, sometimes even a single letter. But escalate this a step further, and we can see the same trend within figures of prominence. If I told you that one of the biggest actresses in Hollywood today was Nikolina Dobrevsky, you probably don't know who I'm talking about, because she goes by Nina Dobrev. Or take, for example, Vera Chokalingam. Mindy Kaling, you probably recognize her from The Office. Let's try this one more time. Krishnajit Banji. Sir Ben Kingsley. And so for each of these individuals, the decision to change their name or adopt a different moniker, that's their decision, and I respect that. I've been in their shoes, so I can definitely understand the motivations and the underlying reasons. Perhaps it allowed them to advance further in their career. Perhaps it opened up more doors to them. But what does it say about society? And what does it say to someone like me who has a difficult name? That you have to change yourself to succeed? That you have to compromise your identity to assimilate? That you can't call yourself an American unless you have an American-sounding name? These are all questions that I've personally asked myself, and a question I get asked all the time is, Kamesh, are you ever going to change your name? Are you ever going to legally shorten your name? And the answer to that question is no. And that's a confident, definitive no. The reason I can be so adamant about saying no like that is because of a realization I came to through my dad. And before I explain that to you, let's take a step back and understand the context for why I'm named what I'm named. So my family has a tradition where the firstborn male is named after their grandfather. So me being the firstborn amongst my siblings and being a male, I was named after my grandfather. My dad being the firstborn amongst his siblings and also being a male, he was named after his grandfather. The problem is my great-grandfather had a lot of kids, 11 to be in fact. And as a result, my dad had 8 other cousins who were named the exact same name as him. Kamesh Darisipudi, another super long South Indian name. And of the 8, all of them ended up changing their name to something easier to say, except for one person, my dad. And I asked my dad, Dad, how come you never change your name? You know, it's a little bit difficult to say. I'm sure it would make other people's lives a lot easier. Don't you ever want to change your name? He said, no, I don't. My parents didn't name me what they named me because it would be easy for other people to say. My parents named me what they named me because it was a continuation of my grandfather's legacy. This name represents and embodies all the values that he stood for. There's so many cultural, familial, and traditional name elements behind this name, and I'm not willing to compromise any of that for the sake of convenience. And that's the message I'm here to impart on each and every single one of you here today, that your name does not exist for anyone else's convenience. Your name does not exist for anyone else's convenience, no matter how short or how long, how easy or how difficult, 1 syllable or 100 syllables. Your name does not exist for anyone else's convenience. Now, I think this is a message a lot of parents, and especially immigrant parents, want to share to their children. Does anybody here watch Orange is the New Black? And if you do, you probably recognize this actress, Uzoa Maka Aduba. And she was on The Late Show a while back, and she had an interview with the host. And in that interview, she brought up an anecdote from when she was in 3rd or 4th grade. One day, she came home from school and asked her mom, Mom, can you call me Zoe? And her mom turned around and asked, why? Because no one can say Uzoa Maka. And her mom, without skipping a beat, said, if they can learn how to say Michelangelo, if they can learn how to say Dostoevsky, if they can learn how to say Tchaikovsky, then they can learn how to say Uzoa Maka. Your name does not exist for anyone else's convenience. So the reason I'm here today and the reason I'm speaking on the subject I'm speaking about is because of another phenomenon that I've witnessed amongst my generation and my peers. And that's the trend of adopting a mispronounced version of your name. So for example, especially in the context of South Asian names, I've heard the name Pranav to introduce themselves with that mispronounced version. And that may sound crazy. And just to put this in perspective, if you've ever watched the Comedy Central skit, Key and Peele Substitute Teacher, where this is a skit where the substitute teacher is so adamant that his pronunciation of his students' names is the correct way, and eventually his students accept that pronunciation. So to put that in perspective, imagine if your name was Aaron, but you introduce yourself as Aaron, or if your name was Jacqueline, but you introduce yourself as Jay Quallen, because that's how everyone else called you. Or what if your name was Denise, but you introduced yourself as D-Nice, because it was easier for other people to say? Doesn't that sound ridiculous? And I'm sure that begs the question, if that's the case, then why do people do that? Why do people adopt a mispronounced version of their name? And the answer to that question can be explained through a psychological concept called perceptual fluency, according to Dr. Michael Iskowitz. So to understand this concept, it's important to be cognizant of the fact that humans are innately social creatures, believe it or not. We want to be liked, we want to be embraced, we want to be accepted and related to. So let's say hypothetically I meet someone for the first time and I introduce myself with my name, and it's hard for them to understand and digest. That in turn creates a barrier for them to relate to me because they're not easily processing the information. But if I give them a version of my name that's easy for them, a mispronounced version of my name that's easy for them to comprehend, that barrier goes away, and my brain is tricked into getting that satisfaction, and now I feel like they're able to relate to me just because they can say my name easier. But let me ask you another question. Does this not seem like the easy way out? You know, in 1936, the author of How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie, once famously remarked that the sweetest sound a person can hear is the sound of their own name. And almost 70 years later, we can prove that scientifically. A few years ago, a group of researchers at the New Jersey College of Medicine did a study, and they found that a person hearing their own name activated their prefrontal cortex twice as much as opposed to hearing a word or someone else's name. So given that, I think it's pretty easy to deduce that there's a difference between a word and a name, right? Your name isn't just some random sound coming out of your mouth. It's not some arbitrary combination of syllables that people say. And I think this is so important to realize and understand because this is a notion that's so omnipresent in so many facets of our life, whether it's film or art or literature or even fiction. Take Harry Potter, for example. Who's the arch nemesis throughout the entire saga? Voldemort, right? But what does everyone call him? He who must not be named. He who must not be named. His name had so much power and so much influence that people were scared to say it. And that's because your name is a reflection of who you are. It's your will, it's your legacy, it's your testament, right? You are your name. And I came across a Japanese proverb which I found to be so fitting and appropriate to what I'm talking about. And that's, tigers die and leave their skins. People die and leave their names. So if you're sitting in the audience today and you're a student like me, you have finals in less than 5 days, right? Some of you after TED will head over to Clough to start studying, or Skiles, or Boggs, or Howie. Why is it that we name all these buildings on campus after the names of people? Why don't we just call it the physics building, the math building, the science building? It's because we feel that the most apt and appropriate way to honor someone's contributions and legacy to the Georgia Institute of Technology is through their name. Words have meanings. Names have power. So with all this being said, what do I want to leave you with? You know, if you're someone who doesn't have a difficult to say or a foreign name, this may have been hard for you to relate to, but there's still something each and every single one of you here today can do, and that's try. If you meet someone for the first time and they have a name that's hard for you to say, try. For me personally, I know that I won't be able to pronounce everyone's name 100% of the way it's supposed to be pronounced, and that's simply because I don't have the phonetic experience or vocabulary to do so. But one thing I can do is ask them, am I pronouncing your name correctly? If not, can you help me do so? And that's something all of you can do too. It's the pursuit of effort, not always perfection. But if you are someone like me, someone who has a difficult to say name, there's really one thing you need to change your perspective the way I changed mine. And that's a promise. A promise to yourself to accept and embrace who you actually are. For me personally, I've come to accept the fact that my name will probably never ever fit on an ID or a name tag unless the font size is like 1. I'll never get to share a Coke with a friend because there's no one with a name like this. But I do know 2 things. 1, my name is not a burden. And 2, it doesn't exist for your convenience. Thank you.